Well, this is a little bit daunting to follow Brian and his wisdom and poetic delivery. Um, but it's very comforting to be here with so many people who share the lineage that I've been inducted into. So many of us who are coming here to share an alternative wisdom, who who've been on a path of spiritual growth and transformation. Well, I'll mention it again later, but you'll understand why it's important to me. So when I was asked to be part of this program, I have to say, I have to be honest with you, I didn't think they were inviting me. I think it was like, I thought it was a general invitation to anybody at CIIS or PCC or whatever, just if you wanted to, offer something. And so I said, I'm not ready to do that. So I didn't answer. Then I got another letter that said, no, we're really serious. At which point, Elizabeth McAnally said, whatever you want to do on Thomas. So two things have been on my mind since she said that. One is, how do we tell the story? Thomas said he has that moving essay he wrote where he was supposed to address a group, and he said, what will I tell them? What will I say? And the trees and the world around him responded, tell them the story. And I've been involved in trying to tell this story for a long time, and I'm really becoming more and more aware of how hard it is for people to get it at the moment. And I'm going to be offering some observations from really outside academia. Is that okay? All right, so these are the things that were on my mind. Tell the story. How do we tell the story? What is the new cosmology? That's been on my mind. And then one of those this levels that Brian talked about. The other thing that's been on my mind for years is Thomas saying to us, my work is the downfall of Western civilization as we know it. That's preoccupied me for a long time. And I come out as a Catholic sister, I come out of a tradition of people who want to get things done. We want to move in and see an issue, analyze it, gather together all the help, and really either wipe out the issue or set up really good systems to deal with it. So this goal of eliminating Western civilization as we know it is not local, that I'm used to. It's not even global. It's deep in consciousness. So those are the things that are on my mind. So I'm going to sort of talk to you about them. It's going to be a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of analysis, a little bit of narrative. I was introduced to Thomas Berry's teaching thanks to Matt. I never went to your school, much to my detriment. But I got all of these people who had gone to his school, the Center for Creation Spirituality, who began teaching me all about this creation spirituality and a new way of approaching the earth, or recovering the original blessing of the earth. And so you are probably the first. And I was asked to go and teach at a renewal program and teach creation spirituality. I had not been to the program. And I said yes. I don't know what was influencing me, but I said yes because I had been to a lot of other things that were indigenous based. And I was very much in my own way into creation spirituality. And so I got the notes from the previous teacher. I got other people helping me, and I had ace in the hole. A friend of mine, her name is Kathy Bush, was filming Matt and Thomas Berry and Brian at Creation Spirituality. And when she was finished, I can't remember right now the name of the copies, but there's the rough draft or the first piece, whatever, it's all spliced together, and then you make the actual video. Well, when she made the actual videos, she would just slip me the other one, the rough draft. And so I reviewed them and I taught from them and I mined every bit of wisdom I could find. And that was my introduction. But at the time, there were no books that I knew of except for Dream of the Earth that had anything about new cosmology or anything that put this into something where I could study on my own. So that was a bit of a problem. And so when I began teaching this new consciousness and new cosmology, I was winging it. But as Brian said, I had already been taken over by that desire, that longing that this had to be the rest of my life's work. I had to do this from now on. It was too important to do anything else. So in 1994, after I'd been teaching for about 10 years, bluffing my way through and studying and writing a new lesson plan each group. It was a residential program of 4 months. And so we had 2 groups a year. And each semester I would come up with a brand new approach because I was getting new information and I had to readjust my work. And by 1994, after having done this for about 10 years, there were a lot of sisters and priests out there who had heard about creation spirituality. And the desire was to do just this thing, come together and share the wisdom, form networks, help one another as we move forward. Because I really believe it's a community project, what we're involved in. That's why it's so important to me that I've worked with the Sisters of Earth since 1994 on conferences, but also why I feel at home here, because I feel that same desire is probably what brought you here. We compared notes on what we were teaching, where we got our information from, and what obstacles we were coming into contact with in the audiences we were working with. And as religious teachers, we got a lot of things like, that's a really nice scientific story, but where's God in this? And it wasn't a frivolous question. It was deeply disturbing to many people who were hearing about creation spirituality for the first time, and it didn't seem religious enough or spiritual enough. So at that first conference, we had no speakers. It was just us talking about what we had learned, what we'd done that failed. It was a network and support system. And we've been having conferences every 2 years since then in order to continue that networking and support. They were one of the groups that helped me move from creation spirituality into what is the new cosmology. And it was a little bit of a rocky road. What I discovered when I was teaching cosmology, I came at it from a religious perspective, and I didn't realize that was different than what the dictionary was defining as cosmology at the time. And so I had already 20 to 30 years before I got here under Brian of being in a groove of understanding cosmology differently. And religious cosmology doesn't just say where do we come from? And where are we? Well, it doesn't just say where are we? That's the universe, which is what the scientific story is that I have been embedded in and studying with Brian. But religious cosmology asks the other questions. How did we get here? In other words, what was the source? Where did we come from? What started this? And then who are we and what are we to do? So what I'm doing right now is I'm suggesting that maybe we're at a time of having moved beyond the initial 30 to 40 years of all floundering by ourselves. And maybe we need to start having dialogue between my group and the academic world, between the ones who are really sitting with new groups of people all the time and wanting to help with their conversion, and the people who are doing the study and research and coming up with new insights. I don't see enough of a dialogue between them. And so what I want to suggest is that maybe we need to start thinking of religious cosmology. I apologize, Brian, because when I tell the story to groups of people, they're usually in awe, and they're usually terribly intimidated. They can't tell the story after I tell it to them. It's too big. And they come to me and they say, wow, are you a scientist? I'm the farthest thing from a scientist. I'm an artist. So, like, the two shall never meet. But what happens is I've been so sunk in the beauty of the universe story, and when I tell it, I think other people are going to catch the fire the same way, and they don't always. They don't always. So, I have some little diagrams, and I realize I don't think I have enough for everybody. One of the sisters, who was a sister of Earth, gave me this. This is what I mean by networking and supporting one another. We trade information all the time, and so this was handed to me. This diagram was handed to me. It has a few more things on it. I apologize for not being able to put them all up there, but this is the way I was introduced to new cosmology. Okay. The universe is the primary revelation. This diagram is read from the bottom up. The universe is the first thing we see, we perceive, we roam around in it, we learn about it through our senses. And then, if the diagrams were a little bit bigger, they would, there they are, it's on yours. Okay, I couldn't make my computer make a little fire ring, but what that symbolized was people then coming together after their day of wandering through all the beauty and challenge of their world. They came together and they talked about the questions of, where are we? What are we doing here? Why are we here? Where did we come from? What's out there? And it was the community gathered who generally came up with an origin story. People don't come up with an origin story by themselves. It needs a community of people who are pondering and imagining, and not only using their senses, which we've now often given over what we learn through our senses to science, and we forget to learn through our own senses, but also dreams and intuition and imagination. And that forms a group's origin story or their creation story. And the thing that I want you to notice on this here, the image of the universe is only one part of this cosmology. What is important is to say also, who started this? What is the character of that starting being or force or circumstance? And then, who's the human in this? The reason I find this helpful is because it challenges us on what Brian said Thomas was talking about, the reinvention of the human. Right now we understand, well, we're mostly called consumers. Occasionally we remember what we're citizens when we're talking about voting, but we've dumbed down our understanding of who we are. And that's what needs to change according to, that's what these little lines are. They all influence one another. And our understanding of the universe has to push us into a new understanding of who the human is. And then out of this, a group, out of having done this work, they've come up with their origin story, which has embedded in it all of these images of space and time also. And then they decide, how are they going to live? How are they going to survive? How will they get their food, their clothing, their shelter? How will they live in a spiritual world? How will they pass on wisdom? How will they celebrate? And how will they govern themselves? That all is on the surface, and what's underneath here isn't seen anymore. It's hidden, but it's influencing all the choices. Does that make sense? Okay, I want to tell you a story. This is an Aboriginal creation myth. In the beginning, the creative ancestors wandered through the as yet undifferentiated land, creating things as they went. They sang them into being. And at the end of their day, they would gather around the fire and talk about what had been created and think of what needed to happen next and comment on each other's work and let their imaginations run. And then they would go to sleep. And with all that input, the work of the day before, the input of the group, and the imaginings, they would dream the features of the next day's creation. So the next day comes, they wander through the land, again creating rivers and streams and koalas and humans and plants and clouds. And when they've passed by and everything's been sung into being, while they're walking away, all those beings are deciding whether or not they like the way they've been created. And they can switch around really until they feel comfortable. They can become, a koala can become a river, a mountain can become a plant. Everything switches until they find the identity that fits them. When they were finished creating, the creative ancestors then gave themselves a pat on the back and retired into their creation, there to remain a psychic presence for all time. This is what I like about this story, is it has embedded in it the source of the universe. These are creative ancestors who dream what's to be created and then sing it into being. This is not just who made the universe, but this is who will become the model of the human. Okay? The universe is a place where all the beings choose their own way of being. And that includes actually the human. So for these Aboriginal people, they would never think of planting, because planting is telling a plant where to grow, and you wouldn't do that. So what they do when they are foraging is they assume that the plant will talk to them and guide them to where it is, because the creative ancestors are present in creation as a psychic presence, and their psyche can connect with the plant psyche. It's because they have this vision of the psychic connections that they have the capacity to live that way. Does that make sense? Okay, here's my problem. When the Aboriginal people hear that story, it's a story they can remember, and they can retell it. It has embedded in it all that they need to know about how will they then go about survival. It has embedded in it everything that they need to make the decisions about survival, what they will celebrate, and how they will govern themselves. That's what I see is missing right now in our telling of the story. I know when I've worked with a group that I have left them with an immense feeling of overwhelm and awe, but they cannot go out and tell the story again. I think the challenge is, how can we move this story that we know about into images and a simple telling that will encompass all we need to know in order to make decisions about the downfall of Western civilization as we know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Toni. Thank you for letting us in on your experience of telling the story and the experience of people who don't have it in their makeup. It's another one of those cuts and alienation situations. So, thank you for doing what you're doing.